wind whispered through the tall stalks of corn one hot summer evening, a faint rustle that echoed in the silence of the lonely fields. It was a sound that belonged to the past before phones, before the busy hum of city life. But tonight, as dusk cloaked the landscape, a different sound broke the stillness, the soft crunch of gravel under heavy boots. Three figures moved quietly toward an old, weathered farmhouse, shadows merging with the encroaching night. They were confident, clad in dark clothing, eyes glinting with greed and ambition. They believed the farmer was away, just a ghost flicking through the corners of memory. Their target was ripe for the picking, an easy score in the quiet countryside, far from any prying eyes. But that was exactly where they were wrong. Inside the farmhouse, beneath the flickering light of an oil lamp, sat a man named Thomas. Rugged and resilient, he had spent his life tending to the land his family had owned for generations. He knew every rock, every blade of grass like the back of his weathered hands. In the fading light, he stared out the window, something primal awakening within him. His instincts had kicked in just hours before. He noticed the slight disturbance in the usual rhythm of the day, an odd quiet that settled over the fields where kids used to play, a tension that hung in the air like a heavy fog. Something was looming, and even in his heart, he felt the thrill of anticipation, the steady beat of adrenaline. Now, as darkness spread, he sat in silence, his eyes narrowed against the glow from the lamp. It was a risky game that put the hairs on the back of his neck on alert. He had heard tales of men like these, ruthless and cold, who thought they could waltz into lives unsuspecting, past families who worked hard just to put food on the table. A breath drew in sharply through clenched teeth, his intention palpable. He gripped the old shotgun resting beside him, its wooden stock almost as worn as his hands. It had been years since he fired it, but he remembered. He remembered the way it felt, the power and weight of it, and more importantly, the responsibility. Outside, the three men crept closer, their eyes darting left and right, surveying the shadows. They were hunters now, and the farmhouse was their prey. They took slow, deliberate steps toward the back door, prepared to break into a home they presumed was long forgotten. With each footfall, their confidence swelled as if they dared the very forces of nature themselves. But out here, among the fields that touched the horizon, things were never as simple as they seemed. When they reached the back door, one of them, Ryan, the self-appointed leader, turned to the others. "Let's get this over with, quick and quiet." Nods of agreement swept through the group, each member thick with spite, yet unaware of the storm waiting just inside. With a swift motion, Ryan pushed against the door. It creaked open and they moved in, hearts racing with the thrill of the hunt. As they stepped inside, a rush of cool air met them, laced with the smell of aged wood and dust. They found themselves in a dark kitchen, shadows clinging obstinately to the corners. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, but he brushed it aside. "Grab whatever you can find," he urged, flipping on the flashlight he carried. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating cobwebs in the corners and fading photographs on the walls. But as they moved past the wooden table, something caught Ryan's eye: the front window, slightly ajar. The curtains swayed gently, whispering secrets he could not hear. A chill skittered down his spine, but he shook it off. Meanwhile, Thomas held himself still, breathing low and measured like the steady thrum of the earth beneath him. His body thrummed with an intensity only matched by wild animals waiting to pounce. He was ready and alert, as he trained himself to be. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows across the ground, and the farmhouse creaked like an old man finally releasing his worries. Silence filled the air, but attention crackled like static electricity. Time seemed to stretch thin, each second a taut wire ready to snap. "Money's gotta be somewhere," one of the others murmured, stepping into the living room. As Ryan rifled through drawers, the atmosphere was thickening with uncertainty, a palpable dread creeping into their minds. Something uncommon was seeping in, the unmistakable feeling of danger. Just then, a shattering clap cut through the stillness, the sound hollow and deep. Ryan's head snapped toward the front. The living room fell eerily quiet, hearts thumping loudly in their chests. "Probably just the old house settling," another one scoffed, yet uncertainty clouded his voice. But Thomas knew better. That sound was not the settling of an old house, but the final breath before action. He gripped the shotgun tighter, the cool barrel warm against his palm. He could almost taste the air thick with fate. Something had to give. Ryan snapped, his confidence waning, though he forced himself to push forward. The group continued rummaging through the dusty drawers, but now a sense of urgency quickened their movements, the thrill of crime giving way to a slithering fear. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked loudly above them. This time it was no mere sound, it was a declaration. Thomas sensed it. He could almost feel their panic through the walls. One of the men gasped, moving to the archway, eyes wide. "Maybe it's just a raccoon or something," Ryan suggested, but shaky confidence slipped through the cracks of his voice. He cast a glance back toward the front of the house, fueled by a dawning realization. He could feel it now, trickling through the air, the thrill of anticipation mingled with dread. It was a feeling Thomas had known too well through his years of toil, showing up for each day's work uncertain, hoping the harvest would yield joy instead of ruin. With a sudden movement, Thomas emerged from the darkness, the shotgun steady in his hands. His voice roared, cutting through the air like a bolt of lightning. Ryan's heart fell into his stomach and pure panic erupted in his eyes. The confrontation had turned nightmarish, the tables flipping with visceral speed. One robber shouted, the tone devoid of bravado now. Faces grew pale, the bravado of the night collapsing like a puppet string severed. Thomas thundered, the fervor of the farmer awakening like an eternal flame. In that moment, Ryan took a step back, his heart pounding in his ears. They hadn't prepared for this. They were trespassing, invading a life built on strength and resilience, and now the power hung in the balance. Ryan shouted, trying desperately to sound brave, but his voice wavered, giving way to fear he could no longer mask. Thomas shot back. He took a measured step forward, the shotgun drawing a line in the sand, a fierce guardian ready to protect his life's work. The other two robbers shifted uneasily, fidgeting like cornered animals in the unforgiving light. "Maybe we should just leave," one murmured, glancing back toward the door. Ryan hissed, panic rising in him. They had come too far to back down now, too deep in the darkness to find their way back. Thomas's voice dropped, an eerie calm washing over him. "You have a choice," he said, with the wisdom of 1,000 storms behind him. This wasn't just about money for him. This was about respect, dignity, the blood and sweat of every planting season ingrained in the very soil around them. If they thought they could simply walk in, take what didn't belong to them, they would learn otherwise. As the tension in the air thickened, the robbers glanced at one another, uncertainty flickering like dying embers. Ryan, the bravado stripped away, found the potential of violence threatening from the light of the shotgun hanging between them. Facing the weight of consequences, he felt small, locked in a game he no longer controlled. "Let's just leave," he whispered again, his own voice betraying him. But Thomas stood unwavering, rooted deep in the firm ground of his beliefs. "Then walk away." And in that moment, something shifted. If there was one thing every small-town farmer knew, it was the boundless strength of standing your ground. Slowly, Ryan and his two companions turned, their fear becoming palpable, shadows of men who would never challenge this ground again. They scrambled back out of the farmhouse, adrenaline pumping, the cool night air greeting them like an old friend. They fled down the path that had once seemed inviting, hearts racing, passions igniting. As they disappeared into the distance, Thomas lowered the shotgun, his breath a mix of relief and resolve. He stared into the dark where shadows danced among the fields, surely reflecting the very heart of struggle lived within these walls. He had been prepared to protect everything he loved. None could take that from him. And deep down, as he looked out at the stars that twinkled above like spirits of stories shared, he felt a sense of peace wrapping around him. The land belonged to him, tilled and torn from his own two hands. It wouldn't be taken lightly. And as the night fell, he stood tall, a fierce guardian of the seeds planted anew, life's fight woven into every breath, ready to confront whatever may come next. The wind howled through the fields, a restless spirit dancing under the pale moonlight. Shadows stretched long and thin across the earth as three figures crept through the lush, dark grass. They moved cautiously, boots sinking into the soft soil, hearts thrumming like drums in the night. Tonight was the night they would strike. To these robbers, the old Thompson farm seemed like an easy target, a forgotten relic for an empty pocket. The rumors they'd heard painted a picture of a retired farmer, a man too old to put up a fight, too weary to protect what he had left. But the truth lay hidden in the shadows, waiting for them. As the trio approached the weathered farmhouse, its paint peeling and shutters swaying gently, Ryan, the group's leader, glanced at his friends, a fierce grin cutting across his face. "This will be quick," he whispered, excitement fueling his bravado. They climbed the creaky steps, the boards protesting under their weight. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and memories of a life spent working the land. Faint beams of moonlight slipped through the cracks, illuminating old photographs of a family long gone. To the robbers, it was just junk of farmers' forgotten past, but they could not know that the past was far from forgotten by the man who owned it. Thomas Thompson sat in the living room, a single lamp flickering with the last remnants of light. His rough hands rested on the barrel of an old shotgun, the weight familiar, a comforting presence after years in a world that never seemed to give back. He listened intently, every creak and groan of the house resonating with him like an old friend's call. Hours before, the air had shifted. The birds had grown quiet, the clouds gathered, and an unsettling energy wrapped around him. Something was coming, he could feel it crawling under his skin. So he waited, not with fear, but with fierce determination. Just as the robbers stepped further into the gloom, the sound of shuffling feet echoed through the hallway. Familiar footsteps brushed against the dust long settled on the floor. Ryan's heart raced, a cold sweat forming on his brow. He asked, eyes darting nervously. "Probably nothing," one of the others, Mike replied, though his voice lacked certainty. But as they moved deeper inside, shadows danced around them and the oppressive atmosphere thickened like a storm pressing down on the land. Anxiety coiled within their chests. Thomas watched them from his vantage point, his breath silent, muscles taut. He recognized that look in their eyes. They thought they were invincible. They were young, reckless, drunk on the buzz of crime. Little did they realize they were not the apex predators. With a sudden bang, the old wooden door swung open wider, slamming against the wall, and Ryan felt himself freeze. "We need to hurry," he whispered urgently. They needed to be quick. Outside, the night air buzzed with tension, and every flicker of movement felt like an omen. But as they started to sift through drawers stacked with dusty trinkets and fading papers, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. Ryan pulled out an old clock, its hands frozen at 10 past 2. He muttered, tossing it back into the drawer. It was true. The farmhouse was a repository of time stuck, unmoving. But it was more than that. This wasn't merely a place to the old man. It was his heritage, his blood and bones carved into every beam. Then came the sound, a soft, deliberate shifting above them. Thomas took the cue, his heart pounding but his resolve unwavering. He stood, the shotgun feeling like an extension of himself, and moved quietly toward the staircase leading to the upper floors. Mike blurted, eyes wide. Fear was creeping into their bravado, gnawing at their certainty. Ryan, attempting to mask his worry, urged the others to keep focused. "Shut up." They rummaged faster now, throwing aside old utensils and family keepsakes, unaware of the silent storm closing in on them from above. The air tingled with unspoken tension, each second stretching like an eternity. Thomas reached the top of the stairs and found his breath caught in his throat. He listened. They were all down there, lost in their greed, their misguided quest for easy riches, and he was ready. Ryan insisted, his voice sharp with urgency. But even he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Just then, like thunder after a flash of lightning, Thomas descended from the shadows, his silhouette striking against the wall. The shotgun was aimed unwaveringly at the intruders. His voice boomed like a clap of thunder, shaking the very foundations of the room. The robbers froze, the cold grip of reality snapping around them like a vice. Fear flooded their eyes, and in that instant, Ryan's bravado turned to ice. They hadn't just invaded any ordinary home. They had stumbled into the lair of a man who understood the essence of fight. "Holy," one of them started but was cut off by Thomas's unyielding glare. He commanded again, fierceness threading through every word. Time seemed to pause, the air thick with a tension so heavy it was palpable. Each man could feel the reality of their situation crashing down around them. They were the hunters until now, but in a heartbeat, it became clear who the true predator was. Ryan stepped back, adrenaline coursing through him. "We didn't know anyone was here." "We don't make excuses," Thomas interrupted, the edge in his voice carrying the weight of a lifetime spent surviving, a life where every day was a battle against nature and fate. The room hung in frozen silence, the old farmer towering over the intruders like a sentinel of the very land he protected. The shotgun glinted in the light, a promise wrapped in steel. Mike, shaking, finally broke. We can just leave," he stammered, panic rising in his throat. Thomas studied their faces, searching for any signs of defiance, any glimmer of rebellion. But they were cornered animals now, fear twinkling in their eyes. "You should have thought about that before you came into my home," he growled. The truth was, these men didn't understand. Robbing a home didn't just mean taking possessions. It meant tearing apart the very essence of a man's being. Thomas was no ordinary farmer. He was a product of the land, a guardian of history and legacy, every fallen tree and tilled row a part of him. Panic erupted, and in an instant, Ryan turned to flee. He shouted, dashing for the door as if the act of escape could erase their choices. His friends scrambled after him, hearts racing, survival instincts firing on all cylinders. But Thomas had expected desperation. He stood firm, his figure a bastion against the storm of chaos unraveling around him. Inside his heart, a roaring fire burned bright, ready to defend everything he had built, everything he held dear. With a thunderous roar, he fired a shot into the air, the deafening sound echoing against the walls like the wrath of a vengeful god. The robbers halted in their tracks, wide-eyed and trembling at the sheer power of the moment. They erupted through the back door, tumbling over each other, nearly tripping in their scramble to escape. They couldn't find their footing fast enough. Fear had taken the wheel. Thomas watched as they dashed out into the cool night air, their wavering breaths trailing behind them, an echo of a choice they'd made in the dark without thinking of the consequences. As they faded into the distance, silhouettes against the moonlit fields, a calmness descended over the farmhouse. Thomas stood breathing heavy, the adrenaline still pumping through his veins, but relief washed over him like a gentle rain. He'd fought not just for himself, but for generations past who had walked those very grounds. They would not be forgotten. He walked back into the living room, the shadows now once again his quiet companions. Outside, the stars twinkled down, pale gems glistening in acknowledgement of his courage. The night had tested him, yet his spirit held firm against the tide of fear, just as the fields had held against storms, droughts, and the ceaseless grind of time. This land would not be taken lightly, and Thomas stood as its protector, breathing life into every corner, planting roots deep into a history that the robbers could never understand. Somewhere beyond the darkened horizon, the moon continued to shine, illuminating a farmer's heart unfaltering, rooted in time, ready to face whatever came next. The battle was won, but he knew one thing: he would always be waiting. The wind swept over the cornfields like a thief in the night, rustling through the tall, green stalks. It was late afternoon, yet the clouds gathered thick and gray, casting a shadow over Thompson Farm. The stillness felt heavy, almost like the earth was holding its breath. 3 figures moved cautiously along the dirt path, their hearts pounding with anticipation. They whispered to each other, eyes focused on the old farmhouse at the end of the lane, its crimson paint peeling like the last remnants of a fading dream. The robbers were young, fueled by the kind of reckless hope that often drives people to gamble with fate. Somewhere in their minds, they believed this was going to be an easy score. After all, everyone said the farmer was old, too frail to defend what was left. Ryan, their leader, pushed forward, his heart racing. "Let's make this quick." His voice dripped with false bravado, infused with a mix of excitement and dread. The others nodded, caught up in the moment, blind to the storm that brewed beneath their bravado. As they reached the porch, the worn floorboards creaked under their weight. The house stood silent, cloaked in an eerie calm, the kind of stillness that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand on end. Inside, Thomas Thompson, the farmer, sat in a dim corner of the living room, shadows curling around him. He had sensed something brewing as soon as the wind shifted, felt the air grow heavy with something more than just rain. Years of working the land had attuned him to the rhythms of nature, one of the few things he could rely on in an unsteady world. He knew the stories swirling through town how he was just an old man, tired and forgotten. He had heard the whispers of youth, their laughter laced with the thrill of danger. But Thomas wasn't just any old man. He was the soul of the farm, strong and steadfast, a guardian of the life he had lifted from the earth with his own hands. As the robbers fidgeted nervously outside, battling their doubts, he listened intently. The sound of their footsteps was like music to his ears, every shuffle a reminder of the resolve that coursed through his veins. "Let's go in," Ryan finally urged, nudging the door open. The hinges protested and the old door swung inward, revealing a darkened space filled with relics of lives once lived. Dust motes floated lazily in the dim light, a testament to the quiet that had long settled here. "Spread out," Ryan commanded. "We need to find cash or valuables." They split into 3 directions, prowling through the cramped space, their flashlight beams dancing across the walls. Old family photos caught glints of light, frozen smiles from a time long past. To them, it was all clutter, and they tossed aside memories as if they were mere trinkets. Ryan rifled through drawers, the sound of wood scraping against wood filling the air. He cursed quietly when he found nothing but old postcards and dusty utensils. Meanwhile, Mike stumbled into the kitchen, peering into cupboards as if they might whisper secrets of hidden treasure. He groaned, frustration seeping into his voice. But deep within the house, Thomas remained in his corner, focused and calm. He knew they'd come, just like winter always came after the harvest. Patience had been his greatest ally, a lesson earned through long summers and harsh winters spent tilling the earth. The robbers continued their search, the tension rising like a simmering pot on a hot stove. They felt the weight of their actions, young men chasing a thrill, unaware of the consequences that loomed large. With every creak of the floorboards, a knot tightened in their guts. Ryan's bravado was fading, replaced with an uneasiness that started bubbling to the surface. Mike whispered, glancing anxiously at the door. Ryan snapped, trying to inject confidence he didn't feel. But fear was creeping in, and instinct tells us when danger is near. Several minutes passed as they rummaged through the mess, but the thrill of the hunt was quickly turning sour. A primal sense of caution filled the air like impending rain. Then it happened, a loud shuffling above them, a sound that put their hearts in their throats. For a brief moment, everything stopped. Mike whispered, eyes wide and fearful. Ryan's bravado cracked, probably just the old house settling. He tried to sound tough, but even he could hear the unease in his own voice. Thomas stood above them, listening through the floor, feeling the adrenaline pulse within him. They thought the farm was empty, that he was just some faded ghost in time. But he was alive, breathing, ready to protect his heritage from those who sought to undermine it. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours, and just as doubt threatened to smother them, Thomas took a step down the hallway, leaving the shadows behind him. He roared, his voice a thunderous echo that rattled through the walls. The robbers froze. It wasn't just a voice. It was a warning laced with the force of decades piled high in this very room. Ryan's bravado shattered like glass underfoot. "Holy!" Mike started, panic flooding his face. Ryan shouted while desperately trying to muster courage. Suddenly their bravado faded, leaving only raw terror. But Thomas wasn't done. He stepped into view. A silhouette carved from years of hardship and toil. He gripped his shotgun tightly, a guardian protecting not just property but years of legacy. Time froze. Staring down the barrel of that gun, the young men finally understood what they had done. The thrill of the score vanished in an instant, replaced by the suffocating weight of fear. Ryan tried to backtrack, mind racing. He blurted out, stumbling over his words. Thomas shot back, fury tempered by a life lived with intention. "You stepped into my home, my life, thinking you could take what doesn't belong to you. Leave." Seconds dragged on as the gravity of the situation descended upon them, wide-eyed and trembling. They were just boys in the face of a man who had weathered storms and fought battles of his own in this very place. Mike's breathing quickened, and a quiet voice of reason broke through. "Let's just get out of here," he urged, shaking his head frantically. But Ryan clung to the anger he felt bubbling within him. "We can't back down now." The desperation in his voice echoed loudly against the old walls. Without warning, Thomas lifted the shotgun, steady and unwavering, a reflection of the discipline honed over years of hard work. The robber's bravado vanished like mist in the morning sun. Ryan had spent years chasing fear, but this was an embodiment of his worst nightmare come alive in the form of an old farmer. That's it. The air around Mike shifted, ready to break free. He turned and sprinted toward the door, followed by the others, the thrill of their original bravado extinguished, replaced by primal instincts. They stumbled over each other as they raced for the exit, fear transforming them into frantic animals desperate to escape the predator that stood behind them. Thomas lowered the gun, watching them dart away into the night, mere shadows against the vast expanse of the fields. With every step they took away from the farmhouse, a weight lifted from Thomas's shoulders. His heart still thundered in his chest, but he breathed a sigh of relief. They thought they could take what was his, and without a second thought he had fought back. As they raced down the path, adrenaline still pumping like wildfire, Thomas stood alone in the silence of his home, a fortress built from years of hard labor and unyielding spirit. He had faced them, and his form loomed large against the backdrop of a fading sunset, each breath steady and deliberate. He would continue to guard his land, not just against those who might wish to harm it, but against the indifferent march of time itself. The farm, weathered and aged, bore the scars of struggle, yet it remained vibrant and alive just like him. In that instant, the fields around him sighed with relief, as if they understood that the fight wasn't just for survival, it was for legacy and history. As the darkness wrapped its arms around him, Thomas Thompson felt a knowing peace settle within. He would always be wading brush in hand, ready to defend the stories carved in the very soil beneath his feet. And deep in the quiet of the night, the wind continued to whisper through the cornfields, carrying with it the echoes of bravery that would stand the test of time. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the rolling fields of Thompson Farm. As the last rays of daylight filtered through the tall corn stalks, an uneasy silence settled over the land. The distant sound of a dog barking echoed through the stillness, but for the most part it was quiet too quiet. 3 figures moved stealthily along the dirt path, their hearts racing like a steady drumbeat against the quiet backdrop. They were young, full of swagger, and convinced that tonight was their lucky night. They had heard the whispers around town. The old farmer was too weary to protect his land, too tired to care. Little did they know, this was far from the truth. Ryan, the self-appointed leader, led the charge with a quick glance over his shoulder. "Let's make this quick," he urged, his voice barely above a whisper. The others nodded, their eyes darting nervously between the darkened farmhouse and the vast open fields. They crept closer, their adrenaline pumping, blissfully ignorant of the storm brewing beneath their bravado. Inside the old farmhouse, Thomas Thompson settled into his well-worn armchair, shadows playing across his rugged features. He had been watching the light fade, something in his gut telling him that tonight was different. Years of farm life had honed his instincts like a sharpened blade. It wasn't just crops he tended. It was the pulse of the land, a warning sign that something was coming. Outside, the trio approached the porch steps, their confidence faltering with each creak of the old wood. "This place looks like it's been abandoned," Mike said, trying to mask his uncertainty. Ryan shrugged it off, pushing the door open. "It's fine, just a quick score." As they entered, the air hung thick with dust and neglect. Memories lingered in the corners, trapped beneath layers of time. Discarded family photographs lined the walls, smiling faces from a life long past. But to the robbers, it was all junk, forgotten relics best left behind. They split up, searching through cluttered drawers and empty cabinets, racing against the clock. Every moment felt like a ticking bomb, ready to implode upon them. In the shadowed corners of the kitchen, the faint whispers of their anxiety mingled with the creaking house. Meanwhile, Thomas gripped the edge of his armchair, heart pounding, but he remained still, like a hawk hiding in the trees. He'd spent years cultivating not just the land, but also his ability to wait, to listen. The silence was familiar and comforting, but tonight it felt charged with something darker. Ryan yelled from another room, his voice echoing eerily through the hallway. came the reply from one of his cohorts. Thomas could feel the tension building, the inevitability of a confrontation looming closer. He had endured years of hard work and sacrifice to make this farm what it was. It was more than just land, it was his legacy. He wasn't about to let anyone take that away. Then it happened. A loud crash echoed from the living room as Mike stumbled back, knocking over a stack of old books. He exclaimed, his voice shaking with fright. The noise rattled through the entire house, and for a fleeting moment, even Ryan's bravado slipped. He snapped, though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Thomas took a deep breath, sensing the moment had arrived. He rose slowly from the armchair, instinct kicking in as he steadied himself against the wall. Every movement felt measured, purposeful. He crept through the shadows, the world outside fading away, his own heart a steady drum guiding him through the darkness. "Maybe we should get out of here," Mike suggested, glancing nervously at the door as if it might suddenly become a portal to safety. "No way," Ryan countered, his voice suddenly low. But in his eyes, doubt flickered like a candle in the wind. They didn't know the old man was more than just a frail figure. He was a storm waiting to unleash his fury. Thomas moved silently toward the staircase, hearing their whispers and rising anxiety swirl around him. They thought this place was abandoned, that they could take what they wanted, but that was where they were gravely mistaken. Ryan urged, sounding more desperate now. Thomas reached the top of the stairs, peering down into the living room, watching the chaos unfold. He could hear their voices strained and frantic, filling the space with an energy that wasn't welcome. It was an unwelcome invasion, and he felt the fire rising within him. Thomas's voice boomed from above, grounding them in an instant. The room fell silent as fear gripped the robbers. They looked up, eyes wide, searching for the source of the command. The shadows shifted, and Thomas emerged, standing tall, shotgun gripped tightly in his hands. Ryan's bravado shattered like glass, the reality of the moment crashing down on him. He stammered, voice trembling. "With your scheme, you're in my space now," Thomas replied, stepping into the single beam of moonlight pouring through a window, a figure carved from the annals of his family's history. The air crackled with tension, and the robbers stood frozen, their hearts racing. Each of them realized in that moment that they were no longer the predators, they were the prey. "Let's just leave," Mike urged, his voice a whisper now, fear palpable in every word. But Ryan shook his head, stubbornness creeping in. No, he felt alive with a reckless energy, but reality was crashing in around him. Thomas maintained his steady gaze. "I won't warn you again." With that, adrenaline thrummed through their veins and panic took over. Chaos erupted as Ryan turned to bolt for the door, his feet stumbling over one another. The other robbers followed suit, their wild scramble echoing through the silence of the house. Ryan shouted, tearing through the doorway with sheer desperation. They never considered the legacy of a farmer who had fought too hard to let it slip away. Thomas lowered his weapon, watching as they fled into the dim night, shadows swirling at their heels. He stood tall, a guardian of his land, every heartbeat resonating the victory of holding the ground he loved. The adrenaline ebbed slowly, and a calm settled over the farmhouse as he released a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the leaves as if nature itself celebrated with him. He had stood firm at the crossroads, and in that moment he felt alive. The struggle for his legacy wasn't just physical, it was a testament to years of sacrifice, passion, and heart. Even as the night deepened, Thomas made his way back to the armchair where he had waited so patiently. The shadows danced around him, familiar companions in the stillness. The land would endure, it had survived far worse. As he reclined, reflections of the past swirled like distant stars. Memories flooded in, lifting a child on his shoulders, planting seeds in fertile soil and whispering dreams into the night. This was his home, his haven. Maybe they thought he was old and tired, but within him still burned the fire of resilience, a vigor that time alone could not extinguish. And from that night forward, even as life moved on, he cherished the understanding that he was more than just a farmer. He was a protector, a defender ready to stand against any threat. In the distance, the moonlight bathed the fields, and as the first notes of dawn began to awaken along the horizon, the land breathed once again. Thomas knew he would always be waiting ready to defend the life he had cultivated, rooted in the very heart of who he was. Outside, the world stirred awake, lush and alive, with every blade of grass swaying to a tune only farmers and the earth could know. And thus, Thompson Farm stood a testament to bravery, legacy, and the unwavering spirit of a farmer who would always hold the line. The wind whispered through the fields, stirring the tall cornstalks in a rhythm that mirrored the flicker of unease hanging in the air. As dusk settled over Thompson Farm, it painted the entire landscape in hues of orange and purple, but within the serene beauty, a dark intent lurked in the shadows. 3 figures crept toward the old farmhouse, their silhouettes sharp against the twilight. They moved cautiously, knees bending low, hearts racing with anticipation. To these robbers, this aging property appeared desolate, just another target ripe for the picking, a forgotten relic of times gone by. They were armed with arrogance and youthful folly, convinced the elderly farmer was away, oblivious to the danger that loomed. "Let's make this quick," Ryan, the leader, whispered, eyeing the darkened windows like a hawk. The others nodded, exchanging nervous glances as adrenaline coursed through their veins. This was supposed to be an easy score, just like they had seen in the movies. As they approached the porch, the wooden boards creaked beneath their weight, each sound echoing like an alarm. Inside, the air felt heavy, still, like it was holding its breath. Dust motes danced lazily in the dying light. A few rooms away, Thomas Thompson sat in his worn armchair, the fabric frayed and faded. His world was small, yet it pulsed with life, woven into every crevice of the land he had worked for decades. He sensed something familiar shifting in the air, unease that prickled at the back of his mind. Years on the farm had granted him a keen intuition, and tonight, it tingled with the promise of trouble. Thomas knew he was old, but he also knew that the years had not dulled his instincts or stripped him of his fight. He had spent a lifetime pouring sweat into these fields. The rich soil felt like an extension of himself. And as he tilted his head, the noises beyond his walls told him everything he needed to know. The robbers slipped inside the house, transforming the silence into a chaotic symphony of movement. They scattered, rummaging through drawers, tossing aside family heirlooms as if they were worthless junk. Each slam of a cabinet echoed like a thunderclap, igniting the tension that hung in the air. Ryan led the charge, rifling through papers and scattering belongings in his quest for treasure. He urged, his impatience palpable. The thrill of danger coursed through him, masking the anxiety flickering in the back of his mind. But as they searched, a knot tightened in Thomas's stomach. He could hear their frantic whispers, their dreams of easy money mingling with the dust of the past. They treated his home like a graveyard, plundering memories that were far more valuable than anything made of gold. "Get it together. We'll be rich," Ryan called, shoving aside an old phonograph, unearthing nothing but disappointment. The lack of a quick prize fed their unease, creating a vicious cycle of desperation. Upstairs, Thomas had made his decision. He moved slowly, like a predator stalking its prey, every step deliberate. His heart beat steadily in his chest, fueled by an ancient fire. He would not allow these invaders to strip away his life's work without a fight. Just then, a loud crash broke the tension. A chair had toppled over, sent sprawling by Mike's clumsy retreat. He gasped, eyes darting toward the doorway, whispering fear stirring in his heart. "Shut up." Ryan's bravado faltered, his voice rising as a facade of confidence began to crack. At the top of the stairs, Thomas steadied his breath, feeling the weight of his shotgun heavy and familiar in his hands. It had seen him through years of hardship and despair, a trusty companion as constant as the seasons. Tonight, it would be more than just a tool. It would be his shield, protecting everything he held dear. "Let's just get the money and go," Mike urged again, eyes wide with fear. The tension had escalated, morphing from excitement into terror. They were outside the comfort zone, far from the safety of thrill-seeking. "Maybe we should check the bedrooms," Ryan suggested, but the energy surrounding them was shifting. It felt like a storm was brewing, a sense of foreboding swirling around them. And then, as if drawn into the charged air, Thomas decided it was time to act. His voice boomed, reverberating through the walls with the force of a thunderclap. The robbers froze, shock washing over them like a cold wave. Their hearts raced, survival instincts kicking in. They hadn't expected a confrontation. They had thought they were predators, not prey. Ryan shouted, voice wavered in uncertainty. "It doesn't matter who I am." "What matters is you don't belong here," Thomas replied, stepping into the light, face etched with determination. Years of toil and resilience radiated from him, every wrinkle a story, every scar a testament to the battles he had fought for his land. Panic broke out as realization set in. Mike exclaimed, his bravado crumbling under the weight of fear. But Ryan, fueled by a toxic mix of bravado and desperation, refused to yield. No. The air hung heavy, charged with tension, every second stretching into eternity. Thomas stood firm, unwavering like an oak tree against the storm, ready to protect all he had cultivated over the years. "Leave while you can, while I still give you the chance," he said, his voice steady and powerful. But his words fell on ears deafened by desperation. Mike urged, visibly trembling now. But Ryan stepped forward, fists clenched, anger igniting fear into a reckless blaze. "We didn't come all this way just to turn back," he spat, defiance lacing his tone. Thomas remained calm, ready for whatever was to come. "This is not your fight." And just like that, chaos erupted. With a shout, Ryan lunged, and the moment ruptured like a firework in the night sky, colors exploding in all directions. They scrambled for the door, intent on escaping their own folly. Thomas's resolve kicked up a notch. Sweat trickled down his back as he raised his shotgun, leveling it toward the ceiling and firing a warning shot. The deafening crack reverberated through the halls, rattling the windows. They froze again, panic reflected in their eyes, the weight of reality crashing down. Ryan shouted, finally realizing the depths of their mistake, his breath quickening as they tumbled over each other in a desperate scramble to escape. A wild rush led them back through the house, fumbling over furniture, desperate to flee the turmoil they had invited upon themselves. They burst through the door and into the cool night air, hearts pounding in sync with their hurried footsteps. Thomas lowered the shotgun, the adrenaline still coursing through him. He took a breath, steadied himself, and let the calm wash over him like the dawn breaking across the horizon. The threat had skittered away, leaving him standing tall in the solitude of his home. As the robbers raced down the path, disappearing into the dark, Thomas felt a surge of relief wash over him. He had stood his ground not just out of anger or fear, but to protect the legacy that was his life. Each furrow in the fields, each corner of the farmhouse was stitched together by years of hard work, sacrifice, and love. And now it was safe again. In the silence that followed, he could hear the rustle of the corn, a soft, whispering reassurance from the land he had tended through every season. Step by step, he walked back inside, the weight of the day lifting as the door thudded shut behind him. Night enveloped Thompson Farm, the stars twinkling like distant dreams. Thomas settled back into his armchair, glancing around the familiar space. This was more than a home. It was a sanctuary woven from memories, triumphs, and the enduring spirit of life itself. He remembered the days of his youth, of planting seeds in the spring and harvesting them in the fall. Each cycle taught him patience, resilience, and the art of waiting for the right moment. Tonight had tested that patience, and he had prevailed. As the moonlight streamed through the windows, he reflected on the fleeting nature of life and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. The robbers had underestimated him. They had thought he was weak, a shadow of a person lost to time, but now they knew otherwise. From that day forward, Thomas remained vigilant, always aware of the whispers of the wind and the gentle rustling of the cornfields. He had faced down danger and in doing so, rediscovered a part of himself buried beneath the weight of years. He felt alive, renewed with purpose. Thompson Farm stood mighty against the night, anchored in hope and resilience. It would endure, just as it always had. And Thomas would always be there, watching over the fields, ready to defend the life he cherished, waiting for whatever might come next, knowing deep down in his heart that he could conquer anything life threw his way. The sun dipped low, casting a golden hue over Thompson Farm, an expansive stretch of land with rows of corn standing tall, swaying gently in the late afternoon breeze. Nearby, the farmhouse appeared quiet, its weathered facade telling stories of years gone by. But today, that calm was about to be shattered. As dusk settled, three figures slipped into view, edges dark against the vibrant sky. Known to the townsfolk as thrill-seekers, they prowled with a mix of excitement and arrogance, convinced that the old man who lived here was just a ghost, a relic of a bygone era. "Let's make this quick, in and out," Ryan, the leader, whispered urgently, his voice tinged with bravado. The others nodded, their hearts racing with a cocktail of fear and adrenaline. Just a quick heist, they thought, an easy score on an empty farm. Little did they know they were walking into a meticulously laid trap, the kind that disguised itself within the cozy corners of familiarity. Inside the dimly lit farmhouse, Thomas Thompson sat in his favorite chair, fingers clasped around a mug of black coffee. He knew the evening chill would soon creep in, but he savored these quiet moments of solitude, the world outside fading away. Yet, today felt different. A strange buzz in the air pulled at him, a sixth sense honed over years of laboring on this land. He had heard rumors rattling through town about reckless youths looking for easy pickings, but many underestimated him. They thought he was old and frail, no longer the tough farmer he had once been. But as Thomas gazed out at the fields sprawling before him, a fire still burned within him, a determination forged by years of hard work and sacrifice. Outside, the robbers approached the house, moving cautiously, the crunch of gravel underfoot muffled by their heavy boots. They were filled with bravado, but there was an underlying thread of tension thick as the air before a storm. Ryan took the lead and reached for the front door. "Let's get this over with," he said. As he pushed it open, the door creaked ominously, the sound echoing through the empty space. What they encountered inside was not what they expected. Dust hung in the air like a fog, particles swirling in the dim light. Old photographs adorned the walls, capturing moments of joy, families gathered for meals, children laughing. To the young robbers, these artifacts were just junk, things of the past. They had only come for the present money, valuables, anything of worth. "Spread out," Ryan ordered, and they fanned through the house, ripping drawers open, tossing aside old trinkets that had no monetary value to them. The thrill of the moment buzzed in their veins, their focus singular, riches stolen from the tired hands of an old man. "Nothing in here," one of them grumbled, growing impatient. Ryan snapped, the tension between them growing. The air was thick with excitement and unease, the thrill of the heist overshadowed by a creeping sense of dread. Meanwhile, Thomas listened intently, each footfall, each hushed whisper pouring into his ears, sharpening his senses. They thought they could take what belonged to him without consequence. But this land held more than just his possessions. It held a piece of his soul. Years of struggle, countless battles with nature and life itself were embedded in the soil. He would not let that be stolen. Thomas rose slowly from his chair, heart pounding, the wooden floor creaking beneath him. As he moved toward the staircase, shadows cloaked him, and he felt alive again like an ancient tree rooted deep in the earth, unyielding against the winds of change. Ryan demanded, frustration evident as he began to throw aside more drawers. "Maybe he's hiding it," another robber suggested, his voice quivering with uncertainty. The unease was palpable, a dark cloud settling over them. By now, Thomas was at the top of the stairs, listening carefully. He could hear their muffled panic, their desperation. To them, this farmhouse was merely a slip of land, yet to him, it was everything. His family's legacy breathed into every beam that supported the roof above him. "Mike," another of the robbers said as doubt crept into his tone. "Shut it. We'll be fine," Ryan snapped back, but even he could not shake the creeping fear digging deep into his mind. They were hunting a ghost, but they had awakened a lion. When Thomas heard Mike's anxious tone, he made his move. He stepped forward, lingering in the shadows. His voice thundered, resonating through the dimly lit corridors like a bolt of lightning. The robbers froze as if frozen in time. Fear bounced between them like a live wire, awakening their instincts to flee. Ryan gasped, adrenaline surging through him. The command was laced with power, the years of toil lending strength to his voice. Panic true to form pulled at their hearts. They turned to each other, backing away slowly, confusion mixing with terror. Mike whispered, his voice cracking. "Yes," Ryan hissed, desperation lacing his words. They were no longer in control, the tide had turned. Thomas stepped into the light, his face carved with resolve and years of hardship. The shotgun rested comfortably in his hands, and the sight of it sent a jolt of fear through the robbers. They thought they would waltz into this man's life and take what they wanted. They had underestimated him. "Leave," Thomas thundered, his presence commanding the room filled with an undeniable energy. The atmosphere shifted and the air began to pulse with the weight of his authority. Finally, the three men stumbled backward. The bravado faded from their eyes, replaced with sheer terror. "We didn't mean it. We're sorry," one of them pleaded, gripping onto the threads of panic. Thomas replied, every word carrying the weight of a life lived defending what mattered most. "You want something." Ryan glanced back toward the door, weighing his options. The thrill had turned to dread and the moment shattered like glass. He shouted, the panic in his voice echoing off the walls as he turned to flee. The others followed suit, scrambling for the exit. Thomas watched them, steady and resolute, the shotgun resting at his side, the power of generations standing firm against those who would take what didn't belong to them. They raced through the house like wild animals, confusion following them like shadows, until finally they burst through the front door into the cool night air. The evening wind rustled through the cornfields, calm returning in their hurried footsteps. With his heart pumping fiercely, Thomas lowered the shotgun, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. They had come for him, but they had not found him vulnerable and weak. They had found a man ready to defend all he held dear. Outside, the robbers fumbled down the path, breathing heavily, fear clawing at their minds. They had thought the old farmer would pose no real threat, that someone as aged as he wouldn't stand up against their recklessness. But they were wrong. As they stumbled away from the farm, the adrenaline continued to pump through their veins, their foolish bravado crumbling. There was no thrill left, only the overwhelming urge to escape the chaos they had invited upon themselves. Thomas stood still for a moment, grounded, the heartbeat of the land resonating through his being. The truth of the night settled in. He had stood against them, had defended his home, and emerged victorious. The moonlight cast a soft glow across the fields, illuminating the rich rows of corn. Thomas smiled faintly, knowing this land held more than just crops. It held his spirit and his fight. He walked back inside, closing the door behind him, the familiar creaks of his home welcoming him back. Each step resonated as a reminder of what he had fought for, not just to save his belongings, but to uphold the life he had built with sweat, blood, and tears. As he sank back into his armchair, a sense of calm washed over him. The wind picked up outside, rustling through the fields in a soft, melodic whisper, a chorus celebrating resilience. He took a deep breath, letting the sweetness of victory fill his lungs. Something unfurled within him, the understanding that he was still capable, still strong. The fire that powered him through years of labor was still alive and flickering. In the distance, nature enveloped him, the orchestra of the night playing through the chirps of crickets and rustle of leaves. This farm wasn't just his dwelling, it was a testament to his life, his struggles, and his victories. And every time a challenge approached, Thomas would be waiting, ready to protect not just his land, but the heart that beat within it. He understood now that he was more than a farmer. He was a guardian, the embodiment of resilience against a world unpredictable, yet forever beautiful. The night deepened around him as the stars twinkled high above, and in that moment he felt not just alive, but invincible. Thompson Farm stood resilient against all odds, its spirit woven into every corn stalk, every memory, proud and ready for whatever came next. The sun was beginning to set over Thompson Farm, casting long shadows across the fields, painting the horizon in deep oranges and purples. It looked peaceful, almost idyllic, but beneath that calm surface, danger lurked, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Three figures crept closer, their hearts racing as they approached the old farmhouse, cloaked in twilight. To them it appeared abandoned, a forgotten piece of land left to wither away. They were confident, convinced the farmer was just an old man too weak to defend himself. "Let's make this fast," Ryan whispered, a smirk playing on his lips. The others nodded, eyes glinting with a mix of thrill and unease. In their minds, this was an opportunity, an easy score that would set them up for a life of riches. Little did they know how wrong they were. Inside the dimly lit farmhouse, Thomas Thompson sat in his weathered chair, fingers wrapped around a mug of black coffee. The wind rustled outside, sending a chill through the air, echoing the eerie sense that something was amiss. He had spent more years than he could count cultivating this land, understanding its rhythms like the back of his hand. Each season, each harvest was woven into the fabric of his very soul. As he took a sip, he sensed a disturbance, something out of place. It was then he remembered the tales he had heard in town whispers of reckless youth seeking thrills and quick cash. He had dismissed them, but now those stories echoed in his mind. His instincts, sharpened by years on the farm, kicked in. Outside, the trio climbed the porch, their boots making soft thuds that barely broke the surreal quiet of the evening. Ryan reached for the door handle, heart pounding with excitement and fear. He urged, adrenaline surging through him. But insecurity lingered like a thin veil over their bravado. As the door opened with a creak, the robbers stepped inside. Dust motes danced lazily through the shafts of fading light, illuminating the chaos that awaited. Drawers were flung open, old family photos scattered beautiful, haunting glimpses of lives once lived but now deemed worthless by those hungry for easy gain. Ryan spat, rummaging through another drawer filled not with gold but with letters, postcards, and memories. Frustration mingled with their thrill, creating a toxic brew that seeped into the air. Maybe he's not even home, Mike suggested, his voice wavering slightly. Doubt seeped in, making him second-guess their reckless plan. Ryan hissed, forcing confidence into his tone. Each room they tore through was filled with memories, but they were blind to it. They saw only old, useless junk. Meanwhile, Thomas stood in the shadows, listening and watching. Heart beating in his chest was a mix of fear and fiery determination. He would not let these trespassers rob him of everything he had fought for. As the robbers moved deeper into the house, their laughter faded, replaced by the suffocating grip of tension. Each creak of the floorboards echoed like a drumbeat to Thomas's ears, a reminder of the storm brewing outside. He understood the game better than they did, the psychological dance of predator and prey. He had been waiting, and now the moment had arrived. Maybe this place really is empty, one of them muttered, doubt creeping into their minds, fueled by the ominous silence. But Ryan dismissed it, anger flaring. He barked out. The realization that they might be waddling in a nest of danger whipped the air around them. Just then, a loud crash erupted from the living room. A chair toppled over as Mike awkwardly backed up in his search, sending a shudder down their spines. He gasped, eyes wide. Ryan's bravado dimmed as he listened carefully. The sound had come from above. He asked, anxiety prickling his skin. A cold silence enveloped them, wrapping around like fog. Outside, the wind howled, making the old farmhouse creak and groan. In that moment, something primal awakened within Thomas. He stepped quietly from the shadows, each footfall deliberate as he made his way up the staircase, his senses sharp, his heart steady. Ryan insisted, urgency creeping into his voice. But as they rummaged, fear began to uncoil in their chests. Mike whispered, suddenly alert. The breeze shifted, sending chills down their spines. Then, just when the tension reached a nearly unbearable height, the front door swung open again and Thomas emerged, an imposing figure standing in the doorframe like an ancient oak tree, unyielding against the wind. "You boys shouldn't be here," he called, voice steady and resolute. The robbers froze, eyes wide. Thomas had come alive, every wrinkle on his face telling a story of battles fought and won. This was no ghost. This was a man birthed from the soil, ready to defend his home. He shouted, the intensity roaring through the air like thunder rolling across a stormy sky. Panic erupted in Ryan's eyes, and within an instant he turned to bolt for the door. He shouted, fear engulfing his bravado, and the trio scrambled toward the exit, nearly tumbling over one another. Thomas moved swiftly, shotgun gripped firmly in his hands, grounding himself in the moment. He wouldn't let them escape without knowing the truth. He commanded, and the sound slammed into them, halting their flight. "What do you want?" Ryan stammered, desperation leaking into his tone. Thomas replied with fury, stepping closer, the barrel of the shotgun unwavering. Mike trembled as he glanced between the others, adrenaline pulsing through his veins. He protested weakly, fear bubbling to the surface. "Then leave before you find out what happens to thieves," Thomas warned, ever the guardian of the life he had built. At that moment, chaos spilled over, and the robbers scrambled to escape the farmhouse. Thomas's heart raced, the smoke of tension still thick in the air as the men burst out the door and into the night. Panting, they fled down the path, their hearts pounding like war drums in their chests. But behind them they heard the voice of the farmer, a steady, calm echo reflecting authority and rage intertwining. The robbers dashed through the fields, fear propelling them forward, their breath coming in frantic gasps. The cool night air felt alive, every rustle in the grass threatening to reveal something lurking just beyond their vision. At the edge of the cornfields, they finally stopped, gasping for breath. Uncontrolled panic clawed at their insides. Mike gasped, still pressed against the stalks, their echoes vibrating in their minds. "This wasn't supposed to happen," Ryan said, rage mixed with fear. "We were supposed to get rich." But as they caught their breath, something shifted in the air. It felt electric, alive, a sensation that had them glancing over their shoulders, paranoia creeping in. The night transformed rapidly, moments stretched into a gripping silence. The land felt vast and unfriendly, and dread wormed its way into their minds. Ryan growled, desperation pushing him to the brink. Mike shot back, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Do you want to go back in there?" But Ryan's anger simmered. "Maybe we can still figure something out." Mike's voice wavered as he looked back toward the farmhouse, the darkness threatening to swallow them whole. Just then, a distant sound sliced through the air, the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching on gravel. Panic washed over them. Mike whispered, eyes darting. Ryan glanced back towards the house, dread pooling in his gut. "It's him." The trio scrambled through the towering corn stalks, hearts racing, adrenaline pumping furiously in their veins. They ducked low, holding their breath, the darkness closing in around them like a shroud. From the shadows, Thomas emerged, the farmer's silhouette outlined against the faint glow of the house. He moved with purpose, a hunter on a mission, searching for the intruders who dared to violate his sanctuary. Looking back, Ryan's heart thumped in his chest. He hissed, breathing heavy, but no one had the answer. As the tension mounted, they could feel the weight of their choices hovering like a storm cloud overhead, ready to burst. Just then, Thomas looked toward the fields, locking eyes with the very spot where they were hiding. A chill shot through Ryan's spine as they held their breath, realization dawning on them. They had underestimated the farmer, but it was too late to turn back now. As Thomas stepped forward, he paused, listening intently. The very air felt electric, charged with the impending confrontation. "I know you're out there," he called, a mix of command and challenge in his voice. Fear gripped the robbers tightly, hearts racing as they huddled together, cloaked in darkness. Would they emerge as cowards, or would they stand to face the storm? The fate of their reckless scheme hung in the balance, teetering on a knife's edge as Thomas would not back down. In this moment, they held their collective breath, waiting for their next move, knowing with every heartbeat that their choices were about to collide with the deadly dance of destiny. And outside Thompson Farm, the night deepened, the stars blinked ominously, and the reckoning loomed nearer. In this game of predator and prey, only one would emerge victorious, but the outcome remained to be seen, left dangling in the uncertain twilight of what lay ahead.